Dr. Jack Cooper pressed his hand against the ancient cave wall, his biosensors whirring as they analyzed the pigments that had survived 50,000 years of time. Behind him, the crystalline form of senior researcher Vexlor shifted uncomfortably in the confined space, multiple eyes blinking in sequence as they adjusted to the dim light. "This doesn't make sense," Jack muttered, running the calculations again through his neural interface. According to these depth markers and distance references, this hunter made a shot at over 300 yards. With an atlatl, he turned to face the alien scientist. That should be impossible. Vexlor's crystalline structure pulsed with dismissive purple light. Primitive art often exaggerates. Your species has a notable tendency toward embellishment. The alien's translator struggled to capture the subtle condescension in the harmonics. Jack ignored the jab, his focus entirely on the story told in ochre and charcoal before him. The scene showed a hunter, rendered with surprising detail, taking down what appeared to be an ancient bison. But it was the additional markings, the precise distance notations, wind indicators, and trajectory lines that had caught his attention. "Look at these markings," he said, tracing the faded lines with a scanning beam. "These aren't decorative. They're calculations, complex ones, accounting for wind speed, elevation, even the curvature of the projectile's flight path." He pulled up a holographic overlay, matching the ancient marks with modern ballistic equations. Our ancestors weren't just guessing. They understood this. They could do the math in their heads. The Vex-3 scientist moved closer, crystal structure now pulsing with a more interested blue. "Impossible. Our studies show your species hadn't developed advanced mathematics at this point. These must be coincidental patterns." Jack shook his head, already moving to the next panel. "It's not just this one. Look here, another shot, different hunter, similar notations. And here," he moved his light across the wall, illuminating a series of hunting scenes. "They're all marked, all calculated. These weren't just lucky shots. They were doing something we still don't fully understand." The cave's air filtration system hummed as it processed the dust their movement had stirred up. Outside, the massive research vessel Sentinel hung in the Montana sky, its cloaking field keeping it hidden from modern human detection. This was the 17th site they'd investigated, but the first with such clear evidence. "Even if what you're suggesting is true," Vexlor's voice harmonics shifted to what Jack had learned was their version of academic interest. "Our most advanced targeting systems, using quantum computers, still can't reliably make shots like these under similar conditions. You're suggesting these prehistoric humans could outperform our best technology." "Not suggesting," Jack said, already documenting everything for his report. "Proving. Think about it. These people survived by making these shots. If they missed, they didn't eat. Natural selection would have favored those who could make the impossible possible." He pulled up another holographic overlay, this one showing modern ballistic trajectories alongside the ancient markings. "We've been looking at this all wrong. We thought technology was the peak of targeting evolution. But what if? What if millions of years of evolution created something better than any computer? What if the human brain, specifically adapted for hunting and trajectory calculation, achieved something we can't replicate with machines?" Vexlor's crystal structure now pulsed with deep gold, the color of scientific breakthrough. "The Council will want to study this further. Perhaps we could learn from these ancient techniques." Jack's hand traced one final mark on the wall, a small symbol he'd seen repeated at multiple sites. "I don't think these were just techniques," he said quietly. "I think this was a science we've forgotten. And given what's coming from the outer rim," he let the thought hang in the filtered air. The Vex-3 scientists' colors shifted to a darker shade. They both knew what he meant. The Mraketh attacks were getting closer, their bioships proving nearly impossible to target with contemporary weapons. Perhaps, Vexlor said finally, "It's time to remember what your species has forgotten." Dr. Emily Anderson stood before the quantum extraction chamber, her eyes fixed on the 3 shimmering time windows hovering in the air. Each portal showed a different scene from humanity's past, frozen moments caught between heartbeats. "These are the ones," she said, her voice steady, despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. 3 hunters, each at the exact moment before their historically recorded deaths. We extract them then, and the timeline remains intact. Through the first portal, Mason Thompson stood poised on a buffalo jump, his atlatl raised for one final, impossible shot. The historical records would show his body at the bottom of the cliff, another casualty of the hunt. They'd never show how he'd actually taken down 3 buffalo with one spear throw before his fall. Temporal lock established on Subject 1. The Vex 3 operator chimed, their crystalline form glowing with concentration. Quantum signature is clean. The second portal revealed Kate Mitchell high in the mountain peaks, her bow drawn against a sudden storm. History recorded her death by lightning strike, but the energy readings from her final arrow suggested something far more remarkable had happened in those last moments. Subject 2's timeline is pristine, another operator reported. No causality shadows detected. The third window showed James Walker, crouched in the Arctic snow, his spear readied against something massive moving just outside the portal's view. The records listed him as lost to a blizzard, but the quantum scans showed residual energy patterns that matched no known Ice Age predator. Final subject locked. The third operator confirmed. All temporal coordinates aligned. Emily stepped forward, her hand hovering over the extraction initiative. "Dr. Cooper, your discovery led us here. Would you like to do the honors?" Jack moved to join her at the controls, his eyes moving between the 3 frozen scenes. "These people, they're about to die in their time. We're not just taking them, we're saving them." "Saving them for a greater purpose," Emily corrected. "The Mraketh have already taken 3 outer colonies. Their bioships move in ways our targeting systems can't track. We need..." She paused, looking at the ancient hunters. "We need something beyond technology." Jack nodded and pressed his hand against the quantum interface. The air hummed with building energy as the extraction fields powered up. In each portal, time began to move, but slowly, like honey dripping from a comb. Mason's spear left his atlatl in a perfect arc, physics-defying and beautiful. Kate's arrow split, the first lightning bolt, its path cutting through the storm like a needle through cloth. James' spear thrust forward, against something that seemed to bend the very light around it. "Now," Emily called, and Jack activated the extraction. 3 brilliant flashes lit the chamber. Where the portals had been, 3 stasis fields now hummed, each containing a figure pulled from time's edge. Mason landed in a roll, his hunter's instincts already assessing the room. Kate's bow was drawn before her feet touched the ground, her eyes sharp and alert. James moved like the ice wind, silent and ready. "By the stars," one of the Vex 3 whispered, their crystal form flickering with awe. "Look at their reaction times." Emily stepped forward, her hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "Welcome," she said carefully. "You're safe. You're also about 50,000 years from home." The 3 hunters exchanged glances, a whole conversation passing between them without words. It was Mason who spoke first, his voice rough, but clear. "We know what death looks like," he said, gesturing to the strange room and its alien occupants. "This isn't it. So either the spirits have strange plans for us, or you need something only we can provide." Emily couldn't help but smile. These weren't the primitive savages some had expected. These were survivors, adaptable and quick to understand. "We need hunters," she said simply. "We need people who can make the impossible shot, because the future of humanity depends on it." Kate lowered her bow, but her eyes never stopped moving, taking in every detail. "You have metal birds that fly beyond the stars," she said, surprising everyone. "We saw them through the light window. They're being hunted by something that moves like shadow cats." James nodded, already testing the weight of a piece of modern equipment he'd somehow acquired without anyone noticing. "You want us to hunt the shadow cats, to teach you how to hunt them?" "Yes," Emily breathed, amazed at their quick grasp of the situation. "That's exactly what we need." Mason smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. "Then let's begin the hunt." The Vex-3 observation team watched in stunned silence as Mason Thompson dismantled their most advanced training drone, using nothing but Stone Age logic. He'd never seen such technology before, yet within hours of arriving in their time, he'd already identified its weak points. "See here," he said, pointing to the joint servos with a calloused hand. "Moves like a young deer. Same weaknesses. Hit it here, here, or here." His finger traced the points with deadly precision, and it goes down just as easy. Across the training chamber, Kate Mitchell had turned a holographic target range into her personal hunting ground. The automated systems were supposed to be impossible to predict, yet she knocked and loosed arrows in a blur of motion, each shot finding its mark before the target even fully materialized. "Your light marks project where they'll appear," she explained to the baffled engineers. "Like reading bird shadows on snow before the flock rises. The pattern is always there if you know how to see it." James Walker had taken a different approach entirely. While the others explored the training facility, he'd been quietly observing the Vex-3 themselves. Now he stood before a star chart, his ice-blue eyes taking in the movement of enemy fleet formations. "Your shadow cats hunt like the great ice bears," he said, voice low and measured. "They don't just kill. They herd, drive their prey where they want them." His hand swept across the holographic display. "See how they circle? They're not attacking your outer worlds. They're pushing you somewhere." Dr. Emily Anderson watched it all through the observation window, her expression a mix of wonder and validation. "Do you see now?" she asked the assembled Vex-3 council members. "This is why we needed them." The lead counselor's crystalline form pulsed with reluctant admiration. "They've exceeded our projections, but can they adapt fast enough?" The Mraketh. A sudden alarm cut through the air. On the main display, a training scenario had gone wrong. One of the combat drones had malfunctioned, its safety protocols failing. It charged toward Kate with lethal intent. Before anyone could react, three things happened in perfect synchronization. Mason's hand found a piece of broken drone housing, shaped remarkably like his ancient atlatl. James slid a metal rod from the training rack, his grip adjusting for the different weight and balance. Kate, instead of retreating, stepped forward into the drone's charge. The throw, shot, and dodge happened in the space of a heartbeat. Mason's makeshift projectile hit the drone's left stabilizer, sending it spinning. James' rod pierced its main power core from the side, and Kate, having used the drone's own momentum against it, stood behind the now deactivated machine. An arrow lodged perfectly through its central processing unit. Silence fell over the observation room. "That was," Emily started. "Perfect coordination," the lead counselor finished. "But how? They've never fought together before." Dr. Jack Cooper, who'd been quietly analyzing the scene, stepped forward. "You're wrong. They've never met before, but they've fought together for 50,000 years. Every human hunter knows this dance. It's written in our DNA." Down in the training room, the three hunters were already examining the fallen drone, their hands moving over its surface with the same care their ancestors had used to butcher a successful kill. "Like taking down a mammoth," Mason said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Bigger than a mammoth," Kate added, testing the drone's armor with her knife. "But it bleeds all the same," James finished, already collecting useful parts from the wreckage. Emily turned to the council, her eyes bright with purpose. They're ready for the next phase. It's time to show them the ships. The lead counselor's color shifted to deep blue agreement. Perhaps we've been looking at this wrong. We thought we were teaching them about our technology. But they're teaching us about something far older, Jack finished. Something we'd forgotten in our rush to build better machines. Through the window, the three hunters looked up at the observation room, their eyes holding the same predatory focus that had once brought down the megafauna of Earth. Now that gaze was turned toward the stars, where larger prey awaited. The Vex 3 battle station shuddered as another Mrakath bioship slipped through their defense grid. Through the command center's main viewport, the space battle looked like a dance of lights. Beautiful, except for the fact that each flash meant another defense platform had failed. Primary targeting systems are useless, a crystal form officer reported, their color shifting to emergency red. The bioships are moving too erratically for our predictive algorithms. Kate Mitchell stood at the viewport, her eyes tracking the movement of the enemy ships with the same intensity she'd once used to watch eagle swarms during salmon runs. Something about their movement. Stop trying to predict where they'll be, she said suddenly. Look at where they've been. The pattern. Her hand traced lines in the air, following invisible trails. Mason stepped up beside her, his hunter's eyes narrowing. Like buffalo in the spring. They're not moving random. They're moving like hunting birds, James finished, his voice carrying the same certainty he'd used to read blizzard patterns. Look at the formation. 3 waves. Just like Arctic hawks taking down larger prey. Dr. Emily Anderson turned to the hunters, hope fighting with skepticism in her expression. Can you explain? Mason moved to the tactical display, his fingers dancing over the controls he'd learned just days before. Here, the first wave. He highlighted a group of bioships. They're your scattered flock, making you think they're disorganized. But really, they're hurting us, Kate picked up, moving to another console. Second wave comes in from above and below, like eagles forcing fish into shallow water. You think you're choosing where to go, but you're being driven, James concluded, his eyes never leaving the battle outside. The third wave is the kill strike. But if you know the pattern, a new alarm blared. The main bioship, nearly the size of the battle station itself, had emerged from quantum space. Its surface rippled like living muscle, weapon pods pulsing with deadly energy. Station defenses at 12%, the crystal officer announced. Main weapons cannot lock on target. We need tow. Give us control, Mason said, his voice carrying the same authority that had once led hunting parties across ancient plains. Your machines can't see it, but we can. Emily looked to the Vex 3 commander, who pulsed once in desperate agreement. Do it. 3 control stations lit up, their interfaces reconfiguring to match the hunter's preferences. Each hunter took a position, their hands moving over the controls like they'd been born to them. Like tracking a wounded mammoth in a snowstorm, James murmured, his station focusing on the enemy's blind spots. Or predicting where a startled deer will leap, Kate added, her fingers dancing across targeting controls. Just another day on the hunt, Mason said, a predator's smile playing at his lips. The bioships came in fast, their movements a blur of organic grace. But where the Vex 3 computers saw chaos, the hunters saw patterns as old as life itself. Kate struck first, her shot threading through what looked like empty space, until a bioship materialized exactly where she'd fired, its cloaking field failing as the blast struck home. James' attack came next, a series of precisely timed bursts that forced the second wave to break formation, their instinctive evasion pattern making them vulnerable to Mason's strike. 3 shots, impossibly timed, that caught the lead ships in a crossfire they never saw coming. The massive bioship tried to compensate, but its very nature, Its biological programming made its next move predictable to eyes that had evolved to read such things. "All ships, fire on my mark," Mason called out, his voice steady as he lined up the kill shot. The same voice that had once coordinated hunters to take down the largest beasts ever to walk Earth now directed a space battle. The station shuddered again, but this time in victory as their combined fire struck true. The main bioship's surface rippled once more, then burst apart in a spectacular display of bioluminescence. "Impossible," the crystal officer whispered. "No," Emily said, watching as the remaining bioships retreated in perfect wounded animal formation, just as the hunters had predicted they would. "Not impossible, just very, very old knowledge." In the viewport's reflection, the three hunters shared a look that bridged 50,000 years. The stars might be new, but the hunt was eternal. The holographic training chamber hummed to life, transforming the sterile space into a vast prairie landscape. Mason Thompson stood before a group of mixed alien species, his presence commanding attention despite their advanced technology and evolved forms. "You want to know why your targeting systems fail against the bioships?" He gestured to the simulated herd of buffalo moving across the digital plains. "Because you're looking for machines, but they're not machines. They're prey. And prey moves according to laws older than your civilizations." Behind him, Kate released an arrow into the holographic herd. The projectile curved impossibly, accounting for wind patterns only she could read. "Your ships try to calculate every variable," she said, knocking another arrow. "But the hunt isn't about calculations. It's about understanding." James walked among the alien students, adjusting their stances with the same patience he once used to teach young ice hunters. "Watch the lead buffalo," he instructed. "See how it tests the wind, how its movement influences the entire herd. The Mrakith flagship does the same thing. Nature's patterns don't change, even among the stars." Dr. Emily Anderson watched from the observation deck, recording every moment. Beside her, the Vex 3 High Command pulsed, with various shades of amazement. "They're taking skills developed for ground hunting," one Crystal commander noted, "and applying them to three-dimensional space combat. It should be impossible." "Look there," Emily pointed, as Mason demonstrated a particular targeting technique. The hologram shifted, prairie becoming starfield, buffalo transforming into bioships. But Mason's movements remained the same. The perfect timing, the read of movement, the understanding of how a herd's leader would react. "In space, your enemy can move in any direction," Mason explained, his voice carrying the weight of ancestral knowledge. "But so could the birds we hunted. Up, down, side to side. The principles don't change just because the hunting ground got bigger." Kate had taken over another section, teaching advanced trajectory prediction. The hologram around her showed storm clouds, then solar winds, demonstrating how the same skills that let her thread arrows through gale force winds now guided plasma torpedoes through space distortions. "Feel the flow," she instructed, guiding an arachnid alien's multiple arms through the firing sequence. "Don't fight the current. Use it. Like water finding its path, your shot will find its mark." James' section had become a maze of asteroids and debris, his students learning how to track prey through the chaos of space, the same way he once tracked caribou through blinding snow. "Your technology blinds you," he said, deactivating a student's complex targeting computer. "Sometimes you need to see less to understand more. Listen to the silence between the signals. That's where your prey hides." Emily made notes as the session continued. The integration of prehistoric hunting techniques with advanced space combat was producing results that defied their best projections. The latest simulator runs showed a 300% improvement in hit probability against bioship targets. "It's not just about hitting targets," Mason said later, as they reviewed the day's progress. "It's about understanding the hunt itself. Every student here has hunting instincts buried in their species' past. We're just helping them remember." Kate nodded, adjusting the next day's training program. "The Mrakith think they're the ultimate hunters because their ships are alive. But they've forgotten the most important lesson." "Which is?" Emily asked, though she was beginning to understand. James answered, his eyes fixed on the star field outside. "Life hunted life long before anyone built ships or computers. Those patterns are written in blood and bone, not circuit and code." As if to emphasize his point, an alert came through. Another Mrakith attack on the outer colonies. But this time, the defending ships were crewed by graduates of the Hunters training program. The tactical display showed the battle unfolding. Where once there had been chaos and retreat, now there was purpose and precision. The defenders moved like a wolf pack, their ships dancing through space with the fluid grace of natural predators. "You see," Mason said quietly, pride evident in his voice, "the old ways still work. They've always worked. We just had to remember how to see them." Proxima Station hung in the void like a wounded animal, its defensive shields flickering against the endless night. Mason Thompson watched from the bridge of the advanced Hunter-class ship Thunderspear as the Mrakith biofleet emerged from quantum space, their living ships pulsing with predatory intent. "They're running the Eagle formation again." Kate's voice came through the neural link. Her own ship, Windweaver, already moving to an intercept position. "But something's different this time." "They're adapting," James added from the frost shadow. "Learning from their losses, like smart prey should." The main display showed 37 bioships, their organic hulls shifting and rippling as they moved through space. At their center, a massive command ship sprawled like a cosmic leviathan, its surface dotted with weapon pods that looked uncomfortably like hunting eyes. Dr. Emily Anderson's voice crackled through the command channel. "Proxima Station has 20,000 civilians on board. If it falls, we lose the entire sector. The station's regular defenses are at 18% and failing." Mason's hands tightened on the controls, feeling the same focus settle over him that once guided his spears true. "Kate, you see the pattern in their approach. Like wolves working a herd," she replied, her ship already moving to match the bioship's formation. "They're not just attacking. They're setting up a killing ground." Jane's ship slipped through a field of debris, its stealth systems making it nearly invisible. The command ship's got a blind spot, same place a cave bear would, right behind the main sensor cluster. Mason smiled, the expression more predatory than pleasant. "Time to show them what real hunters can do. Emily, tell the station to be ready. When we move, they need to fire everything they have left at these coordinates." He transmitted a series of points that looked random on the tactical display. The Vex 3 battle computer immediately flagged them as strategically unsound, but Emily had learned to trust the hunter's instincts. The bioships struck first, their attack pattern a blur of organic grace and lethal intent. But where once this would have been chaos, now the hunters saw only opportunity. "Like spearing fish in the spring run," Kate called out, her ship diving through what looked like empty space. A moment later, 2 bioships appeared exactly where she'd fired, their cloaking fields disrupted by shots that had anticipated their movement. James' voice was ice calm as his ship emerged from the debris field, walking the herd. His shots didn't target the ships directly, but rather the space they'd need to move through to maintain their formation. Just as he'd once used the Arctic terrain to guide caribou, now he used the vacuum of space to shepherd living ships. Mason watched the pattern emerge, his hunter's eyes seeing past the technology to the primal dance beneath. The bioships were moving exactly as he predicted, their very nature forcing them to react like the predators they'd been engineered to be. "Now," he called out, and 3 hunter ships struck as one. Kate's shot caught the command ship's upper sensor array, the same way she'd once targeted the eyes of charging bears. James' attack came from below, his barrage forcing the massive vessel to roll exactly as a wounded beast would. And into that perfect moment of vulnerability, Mason lined up the kind of shot that had once brought down mammoths. His weapons found the same sweet spot that every large animal shared, the junction of spine and skull, where even the mightiest could fall. The command ship's surface rippled once, twice, then began to break apart. Its death throes sent waves of bioelectric energy through space, disrupting its escort ship's formation. Proxima Station, fire. Emily's command rang out, and the station's remaining weapons struck the points Mason had identified. Each shot hit a bioship exactly where and when the hunters had known they would be, their panicked evasion patterns as predictable as startled prey. When the energy storms cleared, the massive biofleet was in ruins. The few surviving ships fled into quantum space, their retreat following the same lines that wounded animals had run for millions of years. "Impossible shot," one of the Vex 3 officers whispered. Mason shook his head, already running combat analysis for the next encounter. No such thing as impossible shots, just hunters who remember the old ways and those who've forgotten them. Emily's voice held both awe and understanding. They weren't just ancient hunting techniques, were they? They were a science all their own. The first science, Kate agreed. And still the best, James added. The Great Hall of the Vex 3 Military Academy had never seen such a diverse gathering. Crystal forms sat beside methane breathers, while silicon-based life forms shared space with beings of pure energy. All of them, however, focused their attention on the 3 humans at the center of the chamber. Mason Thompson stood before a holographic display showing the recent victory at Proxima Station. "Your ancestors were hunters," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "Every species here evolved from predators, or prey. Those instincts didn't disappear when you built starships. They just went dormant." Kate Mitchell moved through the crowd, her trained eyes noticing how different species unconsciously arranged themselves in natural groupings. "The Mrakith think their bioships make them ultimate hunters," she said, pausing before a group of arachnoid cadets. "But your species once wove webs between stars. The patterns are still in your blood." James Walker operated the controls, shifting the display to show different hunting techniques from various worlds. "Every environment teaches different lessons," he explained. "Desert hunters learn patience. Ocean predators understand flow. Mountain stalkers know angles. Space is just another hunting ground." Dr. Emily Anderson watched from her position among the Vex 3 High Command as the first graduating class of the Interstellar Hunter program demonstrated their skills. The results were beyond even her most optimistic projections. A crystal form cadet moved their ship through an asteroid field using techniques learned from studying ancient cave bears, anticipating rather than reacting. A methane breather squadron flowed through space like a school of prehistoric fish, each movement perfectly coordinated without electronic assistance. "The old ways," Mason continued, pride evident in his voice, "aren't primitive. They're fundamental. Your technology doesn't replace them. It enhances them." The display shifted to show recent battle footage. A squadron of graduates engaging a Mrakith raiding party, their ships moving with the fluid grace of natural predators. The bioships, for all their organic advancement, couldn't match the primal understanding their opponents brought to the fight. "Watch how they move," Kate pointed out. "Not like machines, like hunters. Each species bringing their own evolutionary memory to the fight." A young Vex 3 officer raised their crystal form. "But the calculations, the trajectories are too complex for instinct alone." James smiled, the expression warming his ice-hardened features. "Your bodies have been making these calculations for millions of years. Every time your ancestors caught prey or escaped a predator, They solved equations your computers still struggle with. The display changed again, showing neural patterns during combat. The graduates' brains lit up in ways that matched their ancient ancestors, accessing deep genetic memory that no algorithm could match. "This is why the program works," Emily added, stepping forward. "We're not teaching new skills. We're awakening old ones. Every graduate here has successfully merged their species' hunting heritage with modern technology." Mason nodded to a group of graduates who had already scored kills against Mrakath forces. "You don't need to think like machines to fight in space. You need to think like what you are, the children of the greatest hunters your world's ever produced." The chamber hummed with energy as understanding spread through the assembled species. This wasn't just a new combat technique, it was a reconnection with their evolutionary heritage. "The next generation of hunters starts here," Kate announced, her eyes meeting those of every species present. Not just human hunters, not just Vex 3 hunters, but every species that ever learned to read the wind, track prey, or strike from shadow. James activated the final display, a map showing how their graduates had already begun changing the course of the war. The Mrakath think evolution ended when they built their bioships. We're going to show them it's only beginning. As the session ended, Emily approached the 3 hunters. "When we brought you forward in time, we thought we were reaching for the past," she said quietly. "But we were actually reaching for the future." Mason watched the graduates file out, each moving with the confident grace of awakened predators. "The future and past are the same thing," he replied. "The hunt never really ends. It just changes hunting grounds." Through the chamber's vast windows, stars beckon like distant prey, waiting for a new generation of hunters to prove their worth among them. The great hall of the Temporal Council hummed with anticipation as Mason Thompson, Kate Mitchell, and James Walker stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. Outside the Crystal Dome, the remnants of the last Mrakath fleet drifted in pieces, their bioships torn apart by hunters they never saw coming. Dr. Emily Anderson stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of history. "The choice before you is unprecedented. According to our original agreement, with the Mrakath threat eliminated, you 3 should return to your original timeline." Mason's hand unconsciously moved to the modern version of his atlatl, now a sophisticated targeting system that still felt like the ancient weapon he'd once known. "Our deaths are still written in those times," he said. "Our tribes recorded them." "But time has changed," Kate added, her eyes on the stars that had become her new hunting grounds. "And so have we." James stood silent, his ice-blue eyes taking in the chamber full of species that had become fellow hunters under their guidance. The choice before them was more complex than any shot they'd ever taken. The Vex 3 High Commander's crystal form pulsed with respectful tones. "You have given us more than victory. You have awakened something we had lost in our rush to the stars. Whatever your choice, your legacy will echo through the ages." Dr. Jack Cooper, now chief of Xenorchaeology, brought forward 3 ancient artifacts, a spear point, an arrowhead, and an ice axe. "We found these at your original sites. Whether you return or stay, the circle remains unbroken." Mason picked up the spear point, feeling the connection to his past. "Our people survived because we passed on our knowledge. If we return, we could teach them more than just hunting," Kate finished, running her fingers over the arrowhead. "Give them dreams of the stars they'd one day reach." James held the ice axe, its edge still sharp after 50,000 years. "Or we could stay, guide the next generation of star hunters. The galaxy's still full of shadows to track through." Emily watched as each hunter wrestled with the decision that would shape not just their lives, but the flow of history itself. The chamber waited in respectful silence. Mason was the first to step forward. "I need to go back," he said finally. "My tribe was on the edge of a great migration. They'll need what I've learned about reading new hunting grounds." Kate shook her head, a smile playing at her lips. "My path leads forward. These stars need hunters who remember the old ways. Someone has to train the next generation." James stood between them, looking first to the past, then to the future. "I'll find a different trail," he said. "There are unexplored regions out there, places where the old ways might be needed most." The council chamber erupted in discussion, but Emily raised her hand for silence. Perhaps this too is as it should be. One to remember, one to teach, one to explore. The separation ceremony was brief but powerful. Mason returned to his time carrying strange dreams that would become cave paintings of hunts among the stars. His tribe's migration would become legend, guided by knowledge that seemed to come from the gods themselves. Kate established the Interstellar Hunters Guild, a school where ancient wisdom and modern technology merged to create something entirely new. Her students came from every species, each adding their own evolutionary memory to the growing library of hunters' lore. James ventured into the unknown regions, leading expeditions that mapped new star lanes and contacted isolated species. His methods of reading space, like ancient hunting grounds, became the foundation for a new age of exploration. In the end, Dr. Emily Anderson stood in the same cave where it had all started, looking at the ancient paintings with new understanding. A group of students, human, Vex 3, and a dozen other species, gathered around her. "The circle continues," she told them, running her hand over the images that had started their journey. "In every age, there are hunters and prey, teachers and students, those who remember and those who dream." On the wall behind her, Mason's original cave painting seemed to move in the light, the ancient hunter's spear tracing a path that led, inevitably, to the stars. Below it, fresh paint marked the beginning of a new story, one that would be told for 50,000 more years to come. The hunt, as always, continued.